Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about Todd Blanche's closing argument. He went first today for about 2.5 hours. I was in the courtroom. I really want to think about this in terms of technical skill and sort of his chops and how one might expect a closing like this to have gone, etc. And having said that, I think he did not do very well at all. So let's start here. He was nearly monotonous. I wrote ponderous in a way that got picked up a lot, and I think that was true also. But just in terms of stylistically, he had very little kind of dynamics. And his sentences were just sort of flat, and it was not clear at any given time where exactly he was going, and maybe even where he had just been. Now, the exception to that was a couple times where he went into high dudgeon on Michael Cohen. And in particular, he tried to play for all it's worth, and I think he played for well more than it was worth, this phone call of October 24th when Cohen had testified that he had spoken to Trump on that day and told him everything was fine. And they had adroitly, the defense confronted Cohen with evidence that made it evident that at least one of the things that were going on in that call, if not the only thing, was a intervention with Keith Schiller, the bodyguard who was near Trump, and the on redirect, actually, the DA was actually able to show a picture that made that clear. But on a day Schiller was near Trump. Anyway, he all of a sudden really put his voice register up an octave or two and said, "Perjury," at about that pace. It left. We'll talk about the prosecution in another YouTube, but man, it just left the prosecution in a very easy position to say, hey, hold on. If you look at what happened on the stand, Cohen was caught flat-footed. He didn't know what he was doing. And, in fact, he was very honestly sort of flummoxed. But that's a far cry from perjury, which is, the way Blanche had put it. And the couple times that he varied in tone and dynamics were about just that. So, I think he overplayed that part. Okay, so stylistically meandering and just it didn't pop. It didn't really engage the jurors. He had a couple, he thought, I'm sure, clever turns of phrases. He called Michael Cohen toward the end the greatest of all time, GOAT, liar. It was a sports metaphor, and it seemed to maybe hit flat with some of the members of the jury. But, he tried to have a few memorable phrases. Okay, in terms of substance, perhaps his biggest error, it's self-inflicted, and he had promised during his opening summation, we thought he'd have to back off, but sure enough, he doubled down on the idea that the 34 pieces of paper are not false. And why not? Because Michael Cohen actually did do $420,000 worth of legal work for Trump in 2017, or else he had a retainer for that amount. The parties went back and forth because retainers are supposed to be written in New York, and there is obviously no retainer here, but he wanted to suggest maybe it was oral. But, Cohen had testified he had done a little bit of legal work, and I mean a real little bit of legal work. He hadn't charged for it because his whole business model at that point was to get the title he wanted, which was counselor to the president, and then use that monetize to the tune of some $4 million, basically getting contracts with companies and third parties that wanted to try to capitalize on his perceived connection to Trump. But so Blanche just maybe because it's what Trump wanted, maybe he felt stuck, but he just said that there were actual. That Cohen was making it all up and lying, and these 34 pieces of paper were in fact true because they were for legal services rather than reimbursement. That was head spinning to me because it was so open to be clobbered, as indeed it was, and we'll talk about it. Then he took on another pretty big chunk that he didn't need to, and maybe it's forced by Trump, but to basically call Stormy Daniels a liar, and she and Keith Davidson and Gina Rodriguez all conspiring together to extort Donald Trump. So that too, he pretty well ignored really important evidence from other people, Hope Hicks and David Pecker, and just asserted basically that it was all like a plan to extort Trump. If you think about it logically, it wouldn't matter in terms of the crimes that Trump is charged with, even if he thought he never, slept with Stormy Daniels and he was, being shaken down. But a very, very hard road to hoe for Blanche to make it seem like that was a big part of it. And then otherwise, look, he did hit on intent, but in a kind of just ipsa dixit, as the lawyers might say. In other words, just said, there's no proof of intent here. But, he didn't go, he barely covered the most important documents in the case, the Weisselberg writings and the McConaughey writing that takes it all and doubles it for taxes and the like, except he did, and they were able to point this out on their closing, suggest that he had shaken down Trump for $60,000. So wait a second, what's that? That's, wanting to eat your cake and have it too, because the shakedown, as it were, for that amount is because Trump was already grossing it up, in the words of Weisselberg, to make him whole, notwithstanding taxes. So I've covered the main ground until he gets to Cohen, and then he tries basically to say, if you get him on one lie, and suggesting, again, the October 24th call was perjury, you can't trust anything. Everything's out the window. And some of the lies he was talking about were that Cohen had completely copped to and told when he was working for Trump as Trump's enforcer and bully boy and liar. So again, an element of chutzpah or inconsistency to try to bring up those lies. Those were the very lies that commended him to Trump, made him valuable to Trump, and that he disavowed. And what you need to show is after disavowing, that he continued to lie. So there were a lot of assertions on Blanche's part that he lied on the stand to you here, there, and the other, but they were pretty weak, pretty wan, and they were certainly consistent with his not lying, but, either disagreements, differences of opinion, or that one, as I told you, where he was, basically flummoxed. But the end was this sort of, it built to the big crescendo of you can't trust Cohen, you can't trust Cohen, you can't trust Cohen. And then he, very oddly, I thought, ended with a list of 10 items of reasonable doubt, he said. And any of them would suffice to introduce reasonable doubt in the case. And he marched through 10 items, but, Sesame Street wise, there were several that were not like the others, and they were very hard to kind of keep a grip on. He'd so much better advised to go for 3 or whatever, but they were things that Stormy had said, and things that Cohen had said, but stuff about McDougal as well. It was really confusing at that point, flat out confusing. So I would say overall lacked, pace, rhythm, rhetorical skill, the kind of toolkit that an orator has. Didn't have it. And then substance-wise, especially the taking on the huge and I think kind of untenable weight of saying the 34 pieces of paper, in fact, were true, and he was paying him a retainer, even though no retainer ever existed, even though Weisselberg had written this out, even though McConnell had taken what Weisselberg had written and stapled it together and kept them in the drawer, nevertheless, they were all true. And then relatedly that, so therefore Trump, he was just paying checks for the $42,000 a month to Cohen for doing no work, that, as if that didn't sound very much like Donald Trump, and then also taking on the whole Stormy story. So really, he kind of dug himself 2 holes, it seemed to me, and then his only way to try to escape was to just, trash Cohen. But to my mind, he did that too much and not fully. And, all in all, it was just not a, smooth, professional, adroit, good, clear-eyed, strong on your feet kind of performance. It, was like a first rehearsal of a closing argument where you just start sort of reading the content to get feedback. It just, it wasn't compelling. And there you have it, 2.5 hours later, and it ended with quite a dramatic event, which I'll tell you about on another YouTube coming shortly. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.